For a long time, I thought pain was something to be avoided. Something that came to break, not to teach. I ran from it like a fire, hiding in work, in irony, in silence that sounded like, "I'm just tired." But one day I realized, pain doesn't chase me. It just waits for me to stop running. It happened not at the moment of disaster, but in a small thing. I was standing in the kitchen, heating up yesterday's soup, when Yulia asked, "Are you really okay?" And I didn't know what to answer. Because, okay, was a mask that I had worn for so long that I had forgotten what my real face looked like. That evening I didn't answer. I just sat on the floor, leaned against the closet, and allowed myself to be silent. Not to run. Not to explain. Just to be. And in that silence I felt for the first time that pain is not the end. It is the beginning. This is not a story about heroism. It's not about how I beat myself up. It's about how I learn to be with myself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it hurts. Because true courage isn't standing on stage with your hands up. It's sitting in the dark and not turning off the light inside. I remember that day, the way people remember their first scar, not because it hurt, but because it changed them. It was Monday. Gray, like a blurry memory. I came to work, as always, with a thermos of coffee and a face that said, "Everything's fine." But something inside was cracking. Not loudly. Like ice underfoot, not yet broken, but no longer holding. The lab was quiet. I stood by the centrifuge, watching it spin, and thought, what if I just leave? I wouldn't run away. I would leave, honestly, without drama. Because staying here meant continuing to play a role that no longer belonged to me. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't have a clear plan. But for the first time, I allowed myself not to know. Not to hide behind, "I'll endure it a little longer." Not to convince myself that stability is more important than the truth. I simply picked up the phone and texted Yulia. "I think it's time for me to leave. Not from life. From the role that suffocates me." She replied a minute later, "I'm with you. Even if it's scary." And it was scary. But there was something alive in that fear. Like the first breath after a long dive. I didn't run away. I chose. And it was new. This moment didn't look heroic. No one applauded. But that was when I first felt, discomfort is not the enemy. It's a door. And I finally dared to open it. I always thought that being strong was about being silent. Not burdening others with my fears. Not showing the cracks. But with Yulia, it didn't work. She saw me even when I was hiding. And one evening, when I said again, "Everything is fine," she simply replied, "And if it's not fine, I'll stay anyway." These words were not loud. They had no pathos. But they broke something in me, that wall I had built up for years so that no one would see how much I hurt. And for the first time I said, "I'm scared. I don't know who I'll be when I stop being the person everyone expects me to be." She didn't try to correct me. She didn't give me advice. She simply took my hand and said, "You already are. And that's enough." From that moment on, our conversations changed. We no longer played, "Everything is fine." We talked about tiredness, about doubts, about how sometimes you want to disappear. Not forever, but just for a day so that no one would ask how you were doing. And in that honesty, tenderness was born. Not as a weakness, but as a strength to be there, even when it's uncomfortable. I started to notice how my attitude towards myself changed. I no longer punished myself for things that were difficult for me. I allowed myself to be in the process. Not perfect. Not ready. Just real. And you know what's strange? The people around me started to change too. It was as if my vulnerability gave them permission to be alive. Not heroes, but people. For a long time, I thought that creativity was an escape. A place where you can hide from reality, rewrite it so that it doesn't hurt. But over time, I realized, real art doesn't hide. It speaks with a voice what we're afraid to say out loud. The first video I created after talking to Yulia wasn't about beauty. It was about cracks. About how we learn to live with them without covering them up. I was writing the script and crying. Not from regret. From finally allowing myself to be honest. Every phrase sounded like a confession. I'm afraid of being unnecessary. I don't always know how to love correctly. I'm tired of being strong. And when I posted it, not as a manifesto, but as an invitation, people started writing, "This is about me." I feel the same way. Thank you for not embellishing it. I realized, discomfort is not something to hide in editing. It is what makes a frame alive. Because when we show ourselves as we are, even in the cracks, we give others permission to be themselves. Not as heroes, but as people who are learning to live with pain, and not lose their tenderness. From that moment on, my videos changed. I was no longer looking for the perfect words. I was looking for honest ones. And every story I created was not about how everything got better, but about how I learned to stay, even when it was uncomfortable. Creativity became not an escape, but a home. A place where pain doesn't have to be hidden. It can be lived and turned into light. I no longer look for easy answers. I don't believe in "everything will be fine" as a spell. Because sometimes it won't be. And that's okay. Life doesn't have to be comfortable to be real. Love doesn't have to be painless to be deep. I don't have to be perfect to be worthy. I learned to stay. With myself. With Yulia. With those who are not afraid to look pain in the eyes. I no longer run away when something breaks. I sit next to you. I listen. Sometimes I'm silent. Sometimes I cry. But always, I stay. My videos are not answers. They are an invitation. To honesty. To awkwardness. To not hiding when it hurts. Because it is there, in the cracks, in the pauses, in the awkward conversations, that something real is born. Not perfect, but alive. I don't know what will happen next. But I know that I will not run away anymore. Because courage is not victory over pain. It is the ability to be with it. And not lose tenderness.